In this video, I'm updating my top 10 players that are over 30 but still active that are most likely to become Hall of Fame members in the future. Stick with me and find out who's on my list. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. It is Hall of Fame season once again, and that means it's time for the annual updating of my top 10 list for players most likely to end up in the Hall of Fame. This video is for the top 10 players currently active over the age of 30. I last made this video about midway through the 2022 season, so there's a lot that's happened between now and then, and that's why it's time to update it to see what's changed. First off, I'm going to say that this list is not going to include the recently retired guys, or guys that may or may not play another year. So we're talking about Miguel Cabrera, Zack Greinke, or Joey Votto maybe. I figure that the majority of their playing career has kind of come to a close, and so it's time to start looking forward to them being on the writer's ballot in the future. I'm also not going to include guys whose careers are winding down. They may have a couple years left, but they are surefire Hall of Famers, so it's not that interesting to include them on this list. That includes guys like Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, and Clayton Kershaw. 3 guys that are still pitching, but probably don't have more than 2 or 3 years left in them. And since I'm not including those guys, that's going to make this list a little bit more interesting to look at because we're projecting a little bit further than saying that Justin Verlander is likely to make it to the Hall of Fame, which is kind of obvious by now to most baseball fans. The best place to start looking at my top 10 list for this year at the end of 2023 is to look back at the previous top 10 list that I made. You'll notice right at the top that Joey Votto and Zack Greinke were numbers 1 and 2, and I'm not including them this year. That means that we're going to have new guys at the top spots. I also didn't include Mike Trout last year because I included him in that obvious Hall of Famer category, but I've decided to rethink that this year because of how many people are actually questioning how good he is anymore, whether he's already on the downside of his career, and whether he's actually a complete lock for the Hall of Fame or not, which, in my opinion, he is, and any talk otherwise is nonsense. And the reason this list is going to change as well is there's a couple guys that haven't been performing well lately or haven't been on the field lately, and there's some guys that moved up from my under 30 list, and so now I've got to make room for them on this list. As a result, you're going to see a lot of changes in this top 10. So let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. The first one up on my list should be an obvious one, and that is Mike Trout. Mike Trout was 32 years old for the 2023 season. He's got 1,600 hits, 368 home runs, wonderful slash line of 301, 412, 582, and a 173 career OPS plus. His WAA and WAR numbers are 63.5 and 85, already numbers that warrant induction in his first ballot into the Hall of Fame and would put him into the inner circle of Hall of Famers. And still, he's only 32 years old. Even if he is on the downside of his career or he has trouble playing more than 100 games in a season on average, he's still going to keep accumulating on top of those numbers and could potentially reach 100 WAR and possibly even 500 home runs if he stays on the field long enough. His accolades really tell the story of why he's number 1 on this list. He's an 11-time All-Star. He won the Rookie of the Year in 2012, 3-time MVP, and outside of those wins, he was in the top 5 of the MVP voting 6 more times. And he has 9 Silver Slugger awards. It really did not take much thought to put Mike Trout as number 1, and in my mind, he retires today. He is a surefire Hall of Famer already. Now, moving on to the number 2 guy on my list, and I must say, he's not actually that far behind Mike Trout. It's Mookie Betts. Mookie is one of my favorite players. He was only 30 years old for the 2023 season, meaning that he's 2 years younger than Mike Trout, but his counting stats are not that far off at 1,485 hits, 252 home runs, and a 138 OPS plus. His OPS plus is way down compared to Trout, but he seems to be able to stay on the field much more often, and so maybe those counting stats will be able to catch up to Trout in the next few years. His WAA and WAR numbers are also a little bit further behind Trout at 46.5 and 64.5, but I'm going to say it here and now, I am not going to be surprised whatsoever that at the end of their careers, Mookie Betts might actually leapfrog Mike Trout as the more valuable player over the course of their entire career. My projections for Mookie: 3,000 hits is very much in the range of likelihood. I don't think he'll get quite to 500 home runs, but I imagine 400 is likely. And a 90-plus WAR career I think is quite achievable, perhaps even 100 WAR if he keeps staying on the field and producing. He's a 7-time All-Star. He was the MVP in 2018. 4 times more he was in the top 5 of the MVP voting. 6 Gold Gloves, 6 Silver Sluggers, and 2 World Series championships. The number 3 guy on my list jumped up a few spots from last year's ranking, and that is Freddy Freeman. Freddie Freeman was 33 for the 2023 season, but he's already got over 2,100 hits, 321 home runs, and a 142 OPS plus for his career. His WAA is 31 and his WAR is 55.5, numbers that are a little bit lower, likely because of the position he plays on the field. But I think he has a chance at 3,000 hits as well and 70-plus WAR career, especially given that 2023 was one of his best seasons at the age of 33, so he shows no signs of slowing down whatsoever. He's a 7-time All-Star as well, also an MVP award winner. 5 more times he was in the top 5 of the MVP award voting, a Gold Glove winner, 3-time Silver Slugger, and a World Series champion with the Atlanta Braves. And I didn't mention this with Mookie, but both Freeman and Mookie are 2 of the most likable people in baseball today, which does go a long way with the Hall of Fame voting. The number 4 guy on my list is another newcomer because 2023 was his age 30 season, and that is Manny Machado. Machado was only 30 years old this year, but he's already got 1,700 plus hits, 313 home runs, and a 125 OPS plus. His WAA of 32.5 and his WAR of 55 are already higher than Freeman, mostly because of his defense. And I think given where he's at the age of 30, because he started playing so young, he's got a great chance at 3,000 hits as well, and should pretty easily be able to achieve an 80 WAR career. His accolades: 6-time All-Star, 4 times he was in the top 5 of the MVP voting, 2-time Gold Glove winner, and a Silver Slugger award. I thought long and hard about where I put Machado on this list, and I ended up here because of how young he still is. He had a down year this year, but he also had elbow surgery to correct whatever issue he was having. So we'll see if he bounces back next year. He's also not incredibly likable. There's a lot of people that don't like his attitude, his personality, and Machado seems to have actually matured into a team leader. So I'm more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for any mistakes that he made as a young player. The number 5 guy on my list, and the guy I had Machado passing, is Nolan Arenado. Arenado and Machado are incredibly close and could have essentially had the same career up to this point. Arenado just approaching 1,700 hits, 325 home runs, and a 122 OPS plus. His WAA of 34 and his WAR of 54.5 are not that far off Machado either. But the key difference here is that Arenado is already 2 years older than Machado, and he's shown signs of decline in the last season. And Arenado, I'm just not sure how much more he's got in the tank at the elite level of a third baseman. We'll have to wait and see what type of year he has in 2024. But because Machado's 2 years younger, that's what made me decide to put him 1 rank higher on this list. I do think Arenado has a good chance at 2,500 hits and a 70-plus WAR career. He's an 8-time All-Star, 4 times he was in the top 5 of the MVP award voting. He's a 5-time Silver Slugger, and this is the one area where he separates himself from Machado. He's been a 10-time Gold Glove winner, and 6 times he won the Platinum Glove Award for the best glove in the entire league. And on top of that, he's more likable than Machado as well. So I could see Arenado flip-flopping with Machado in a lot of people's minds. If I had to pick one now, I'd pick Arenado, but anticipating for the future at the end of their careers, that's why I picked Machado ahead of Arenado. Both are great players, though, in my mind, are likely to be Hall of Famers. The number 6 guy on my list is Cardinals teammate Paul Goldschmidt. Now, Goldschmidt was actually higher on my list last year and was ahead of Freeman, but Freeman really moved up my list quite far this year because of the year that he had last year. Goldschmidt had a good year too, but he's also 2 years older than Freeman. He's got 1,900 hits, so almost a full season of hits behind Freeman in that category, 340 home runs, which is not that far ahead of Freeman, and a 143 OPS plus. His WAA of 38 and his WAR of 62 are both ahead of Freeman, but I think if you give Freeman 2 more seasons compared to Goldschmidt's, I imagine Freeman will pass him up there. But despite that, a WAA of 38 and a WAR of 62 are already Hall of Fame worthy. So in my mind, Goldschmidt doesn't have much more to do to actually end up in the Hall of Fame. I think he has a great shot at 2,500 hits and 70+ WAR. We'll just have to see how quickly his decline happens in his late 30s. He has been a 7-time All-Star. He was an MVP winner last year in 2022. 3 times he was in the top 5 for the MVP award voting. He's a 4-time Gold Glove winner and a 5-time Silver Slugger winner. He did fall down my list a little bit this year, but I still think all 6 of these guys are pretty much sure bets to get into the Hall of Fame. The number 7 guy on my list is Jose Altuve. Altuve is 33 years old. He's already got 2,047 hits, 209 home runs, a 129 OPS plus, and 293 stolen bases. But his WAA and his WAR numbers are a little bit down at 25.5 and 49, showing that he's still got a little bit of room to make up to catch the other guys. But I still think he's likely to get into the Hall of Fame because he has a really good shot at reaching 3,000 hits and a 60+ WAR career. His accolades are pretty outstanding. 8 times he was an All-Star, 3 batting titles. He won an MVP award. He was in the top 5 of the MVP voting 2 more times. A Gold Glove winner, 6 times he's been a Silver Slugger winner, and 2 World Series championships with the Astros. Now, a lot of people are not going to like this because they don't like Altuve, but I'm not one of those. Altuve has had an outstanding career both before 2017 when the cheating scandal came in and after 2017. And I encourage you, I'll link a video down below where you can watch a very compelling investigative story into Altuve's 2017 season, which shows that he very likely had little to do with the cheating scandal at all. But in my mind, if he gets some of these big career numbers and does it with the cheating scandal 10 years in his past, he's likely to get in. Now we're getting to the bottom of my list. One of those guys that stayed in the same spot as last year is number 8, Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole is 32 years old. He's got 145 wins and over 2,100 strikeouts for a 1.30 ERA+. But his WAA and WAR numbers are a little bit low at 24.5 and 41. Still on a pretty good trajectory, but he's got a lot of work to do still. He could end up with 200+ wins, which is actually a pretty big number in today's game, and 3,000 strikeouts as well. If he has a couple more really good seasons, I could see him getting to a 60+ WAR career. But for me, his accolades is really what puts him over the top, especially considering that I think the starting pitching category will be evaluated completely differently by the Hall of Fame voters 10, 20 years into the future. He has been a 6-time All-Star. He finally won his first Cy Young Award in 2023 with the Yankees. But before that, he was also in the top 5 of the Cy Young Award voting 5 different times, showing that he has had an incredibly good peak for the Astros and Yankees. I think given that peak, he has a really good shot at getting in, and it will be bolstered even more if he can continue to be dominant a couple more seasons and pad those numbers up a little bit. The next guy on my list at the number 9 spot is another newcomer, 30-year-old Bryce Harper. Some of you guys might be surprised to see Harper so low on the list, whereas guys like Betts and Machado are much higher at the same age. But that's because Harper's missed some time with injuries, he's had some down years, and now he's a DH first baseman probably going forward through the rest of his career. That doesn't take anything away from Harper, who's actually one of the most exciting players to watch in the game, but I had to rank him where I saw him on this list, based on his future potential against the other guys. He does still have a long way to go as a 30-year-old, with just over 1,500 hits, 306 home runs, a 143 OPS plus, which is outstanding. But his WAA of 26 and his WAR of 46 are a little bit behind, especially comparing to guys like Betts and Machado. I thought about ranking him ahead of Garrett Cole and Jose Altuve on this list, but I just didn't quite put it because I think Bryce Harper has more work to do than those other two. He does have a good chance at 500+ home runs and a 70 WAR career. His accolades are pretty good too. 7-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year in 2012. He's been a 2-time MVP award winner and 3 times that he's won the Silver Slugger. But one thing that I did find interesting is outside of those 2 MVP awards, he's never placed in the top 5 of the MVP award voting in other years, showing that he's either incredibly dominant or he's not good enough to be in the top 5 players of the league. I think Harper is likely to zoom up this list a little bit more in future years, but he's got to prove it first. He's an incredible postseason performer, and if he wins it with his team, it could add to his narrative that much more to get him over the edge. And the number 10 guy on my list is another newcomer to the list, 30-year-old Jose Ramirez. Ramirez is a little bit further behind in the counting stats at just over 1,300 hits, 216 home runs, a 129 OPS plus. He got a little bit later of a start to his career, but he's been just as good as most of the players on this list over the last handful of years. He's got a WAA of 27.5, a WAR of 45.5. But because he got started late, he's not likely to reach many of the milestones like 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, but he has a good chance at a 60-plus WAR career. He has been a 5-time All-Star, 4 times that he's been in the top 5 of the MVP award voting, and 4 Silver Sluggers. You can see from his accolades here just why he's number 10 on this list and further behind the other guys that have gotten a lot more recognition over their careers. He is a great, consistent player, but he's got to keep on doing it into his mid-30s if he wants to be able to catch up to the other guys above him. So that is my top 10. But we're not done yet, because I'm going to wrap this up with a group of 3 guys that I see on their way down and 3 guys that I see on their way up. The guys on their way down start with Giancarlo Stanton. He was actually ranked number 6 on my list last year based on his previous production and his chances of reaching 500 home runs. But he's dropped completely out of the top 10 because I had to find room for new 30-year-olds like Betts, Machado, Harper, and Jose Ramirez. And he had the worst season of his career in 2023. He was still only 33 years old for the 2023 season. He has not reached 1,500 hits yet, but he does have 402 home runs, making him enticingly close to getting to 500, and a 137 OPS plus for his career. The OPS plus number actually decreased this year, as did his WAA and WAR numbers of 23.5 and 45. He still has a projection that he could hit 500 home runs. 60 plus WAR, I think that's a big question mark at this point, especially with how he played in 2023. We'll have to see if he comes back out healthy in 2024 and hitting on a better pace. The next guy on the way down is pitcher for the Red Sox, Chris Sale. He was the number 8 guy on my list last year. At 34 years old for the 2023 season, he has 120 wins, almost 2,200 strikeouts, and a 137 ERA+. His counting stats are definitely low for a 34-year-old because he's been missing a lot of time on the injured list. He's got a WAA of 30.5 and a WAR of 47, which are actually both better than Garrett Cole, but he's just been going in the wrong direction the last couple seasons. Does he have a chance at 200 wins, 3,000 Ks, 60 plus WAR? We'll have to see if he can actually get back on the mound and stay there over the next few seasons, and that's what's going to decide it all. He has been a 7-time All-Star. 6 times he's been in the top 5 for the Cy Young Award voting, showing that he has had an incredible peak. And I think his narrative may be a little bit different if he had actually won 1 or 2 of those awards. But he didn't. The third guy that I put is on his way down. Didn't make my top 10 last year, but was an honorable mention. And that's Jacob deGrom. At 35, he is running out of time. But his story is a difficult one because of how dominant he actually was during the time that he could pitch. Winning the Rookie of the Year, 2 Cy Youngs, and placing in the top 5 of the Cy Young Award voting another time. But that just can't be enough for the Hall of Fame. But his 155 ERA plus, 31 WAA, and 42 WAR, with only 84 wins to his name, shows how incredibly dominant he's been when he has been able to pitch. But in order to make it into the Hall of Fame, he's going to have to come back from another Tommy John surgery and pitch at least a handful more really dominant seasons to even be in the conversation. And finally, the 3 guys on their way up. First is Marcus Semien. At the age of 32, he gets very little recognition, but because he got a late start to his career, his counting stats are still low at just around 1,300 hits, 215 home runs, and a 111 OPS plus. He's got a lot of work to do to get his name on the top 10 of this list. But what's interesting about his career is his best seasons have been the last couple of seasons, so he could actually make up a lot of ground if he keeps playing this way. The next guy is Aaron Judge. I think Aaron Judge may have made the top 10 list if he hadn't been injured for half the season in 2023. But as it stands, he was 31 years old this season, and he's only got 846 hits in his career, which is an incredibly low number as a 31-year-old to be able to make the Hall of Fame. But where the story changes, 257 home runs already out of only 846 hits. That's incredible. And a 164 career OPS plus. His WAA of 29.5 and his WAR of 41.5 are incredibly good for the limited amount of time that he's been on the field. And that's why I couldn't put him in my top 10. It's just not enough time in the game. All he needs to do to be able to get on this list is stay healthy, stay on the field, and keep doing what he does. And my last on the way up guy is San Diego Padres shortstop Xander Bogaerts. I struggled with putting him on this on the way up list because his 2023 season wasn't that great, but I did decide to put him here because he was only 30 years old for this season as well. And at 30, he has almost 1,600 hits, 175 home runs, and a 117 OPS plus as a shortstop. Good for a WAA of 19.5 and a WAR of 39.5. His trajectory is going to be all about how productive he can be into the future in the Padres Stadium into his mid and late 30s. If he has some great seasons, I could see him jumping up this list, but if he keeps playing like he did in 2023, he's going to end up stagnating and not working his way up. So there you have it, my top 10 list of players over 30 still active that are most likely to get into the Hall of Fame, plus 3 guys on their way down and 3 guys that could be on their way up. Thanks once again for joining me. Stay tuned next week when I release another top 10 Hall of Fame video. And in the meantime, keep talking baseball, enjoy the off season, and we'll see you around.